Aubrey Jenkins was elbow-deep in a tub of glittery pins from the merch booth when she realized she'd saved a seat for someone who wasn't coming. "Still no sign of Lily?" her best friend Jenna asked as she adjusted her neon pink tank top and waved toward the stage where the soundcheck drums echoed through the arena. "Nope," Aubrey sighed, plopping down in the second row center stage. She bailed last minute. "Some guy from work took her to a rooftop dinner. Figures." Jenna shrugged as she danced off to grab drinks, leaving Aubrey alone to face the two seats they'd reserved for months. She glanced to her left. Fans were trickling in, filling the rows. To her right, the seat remained empty. What a waste. She pulled her knees up and hugged her arms around them, her oversized hoodie swallowing her frame. The lights dimmed and the pre-show music started pumping through the speakers. People cheered. The energy was electric, and then someone slid into the empty seat beside her. She turned her head, expecting a teenager or maybe a couple who got split up from their friends. But the man sitting next to her didn't look like he belonged at a pop-punk revival concert. He was wearing a tailored navy jacket over a crisp white shirt, no visible logo in sight. His dark hair was slightly windswept, like he'd just stepped off a rooftop helicopter pad. His jawline looked like it had been carved by someone with very specific opinions. He glanced over at her, a little out of place but oddly calm. "Hey, sorry, is this seat taken?" Aubrey blinked. "Not anymore. My friend ditched for a date," he smiled, polite but distant. "Lucky me then." She laughed once and looked away, cheeks warming. This guy had to be in his 30s older, sure, but not in a creepy way. More like in a he probably owns a yacht way. "Didn't expect to find anyone in this row wearing real shoes," she said, eyeing his polished loafers. He glanced at his feet and chuckled. "I didn't expect to be here, to be honest." Aubrey raised a brow. "Then why are you?" He hesitated, then leaned closer so she could hear him over the bass. "Needed a night off. My assistant canceled the reservation I had for dinner and gave me this ticket instead. Said I need to feel something again." Aubrey snorted. "Dramatic assistant." He looked at her then, really looked. "Yeah." She's not wrong, though. For a second, something flickered between them. It wasn't attraction, not just that. It was something heavier, an understanding, a quiet ache. "I'm Aubrey," she said suddenly, sticking out her hand. He took it, warm and firm in hers. "Milo Carter." It sounded familiar. She tilted her head. "Wait, Carter, like Carter Tech." He raised a brow. "Was hoping I'd get at least 10 minutes before that came up." Her mouth parted. "You're that Milo Carter, the Millionaire app guy," he shrugged. "Guilty." Aubrey blinked. "Why are you here? Like, here, I told you." "My assistant has a flair for chaos." He glanced at the stage. "And maybe I needed to remember what it's like to be around people who aren't trying to pitch me something." She studied him. He looked tired beneath the charm, lonely even, but still present, still real. The house lights dimmed and the band burst onto the stage. The crowd erupted. Aubrey stood, cheering, and without thinking, she grabbed Milo's arm. He flinched slightly, surprised, then smiled as she grinned up at him. "You're in for a ride," she yelled over the music. "Guess I am," he said, watching her more than the performers. They danced, shouted lyrics, and laughed through the first half of the concert. Milo didn't try to hide how out of place he was. And Aubrey didn't hide how much she loved the music, the chaos, the freedom. During a slower song, she leaned toward him. "You okay?" He nodded, but his eyes were on her. "You're different," Aubrey laughed. "Different how? You're not trying to impress me." She looked at him, confused. "Why would I?" He leaned in. "Exactly." And just like that, something shifted. After the final encore, the stage lights faded and the crowd filed out. They stayed seated, breathless and buzzing. "I haven't had fun like that in years," he said, running a hand through his hair. She nudged him. "You're welcome," he grinned. "Yeah, I think I owe you one." "You owe me nothing. I didn't even know who you were when I saved the seat." He turned to face her fully. "That's kind of the best part." She stood, stretching her arms. "Well, millionaire man, I hope your assistant's happy now." He didn't move. Just kept watching her like she was something he hadn't expected to find. "Let me take you to dinner," he said suddenly. Aubrey blinked. "Wait, what?" "Not tonight, but soon. You saved me a seat and I don't want this to end here. I don't care if you know who I am." "I just want to know you," she hesitated. "You don't even know anything about me." "I know enough." He stood now, tall and steady. You made me feel something tonight. That's more than most people have managed in a long time. She looked at him, really looked. Past the money, past the perfect hair and tailored clothes, and somehow she believed him. Okay, she said softly. Dinner, but I picked the place. His smile widened, something genuine lighting up in his eyes. Deal. They walked out together, side by side, into the cool night air. And though the concert was over, something else had just begun. The restaurant she picked was tucked between a laundromat and a bookstore, its windows fogged from the warmth inside. The sign above the door read Elio's in faded gold script, and the brick walls were chipped in places, like they'd earned their wear over time. Milo stepped out of the black SUV that had trailed behind Aubrey's rideshare, his coat already unbuttoned despite the chill in the air. He looked up at the building, then back at her. "This is the place?" he asked, his voice more curious than doubtful. She nodded, tugging her beanie lower over her ears. "Yeah, you said you wanted real, right?" He opened the door for her without a word. Inside, the smell of garlic and roasted tomatoes wrapped around them. An older man behind the counter gave Aubrey a wave as she stepped in. "Back table's open," he called, his accent thick and familiar. "Thanks, Marco," she replied, guiding Milo past the small tables lined with mismatched chairs and hand-painted murals of Italian coastlines. When they sat down, he glanced around. "There's no menu," Aubrey leaned back, pulling off her coat. "Marco makes what he feels like. Trust me, it's better than any tasting menu with 7 courses and edible foam." Milo's hands rested on the worn wooden table. He looked out of place again, but not in the same way he had at the concert. Here, he looked like someone who had never once been told no in a space where people didn't care who you were. "How long have you known Marco?" he asked. "Since I was a kid. My dad used to bring me here after work. This was his spot." Milo paused. "Your daddy's still around," she shook her head once. "He passed a few years ago, heart thing." "I'm sorry," she met his eyes. "It's okay, he lived big, laughed louder than anyone I've ever known." She folded her hands. "He would have hated you, by the way." Milo blinked. "Seriously?" "Oh yeah." He didn't trust people with perfect hair and expensive shoes. He glanced down at the polished leather. "Noted, I'll wear sneakers next time." She smiled, and it was different from the one she'd worn at the concert. Softer, warmer. Marco appeared with 2 plates piled high, one with ribbons of pasta slicked in lemon and herbs, the other with roasted eggplant and crumbled cheese. Milo took a bite. He froze mid-chew. "Okay, this is ridiculous. Told you." He set his fork down and leaned forward. "So what do you actually do, Aubrey? When you're not rescuing abandoned concert seats and dragging unsuspecting millionaires to hole-in-the-wall restaurants?" She laughed quietly. "I work at the art museum downtown, visitor services. Sometimes I help with exhibits when they're short-staffed." He tilted his head. "You like it?" "Some days. Others, I wonder if I should have gone for something with a steadier paycheck. But then I get to see a kid stare at a sculpture like it's magic, and I think, yeah. It's worth it," he nodded, thoughtful. "You ever make art yourself?" "Used to. I painted a lot in college, but I stopped after my mom got sick. Didn't really pick it back up after she passed." There was no hesitation in her voice, just quiet ownership of the truth. Milo didn't touch his food for a beat. "You've lost a lot," he said softly. She looked at him. "We all have. I just talk about it more than most." He studied her, then not in the way men usually looked at her, appraising or distracted, but like he was trying to understand something unspoken. "You don't ask people for anything," he said. "You just show up." She shrugged. "Why ask? People either do or they don't." The table fell into silence, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It was full of weight and warmth, like the kind of quiet that came after a song had said everything it needed to. Milo finally sat back, his gaze still on her. "You know, I didn't expect to actually like you." Her eyebrows lifted. "Wow, that's one way to compliment someone." He laughed, low and surprised. "No, I mean, I assumed this night would be pleasant, maybe even a little awkward, and then I'd go back to my world and forget about it. But you're not forgettable." Aubrey blinked, caught off guard. "You don't even know me." "I'm trying to." She didn't answer right away. She just reached for her water, took a sip, then said, "All right, then tell me something about you that's not on Google." He leaned back, considering. "I don't sleep much. I wake up at 3 in the morning most nights." Sometimes I walk around my building's rooftop just to feel like I'm not trapped. That wasn't the answer she expected. You feel trapped. He didn't look away. When everything is controlled, your schedule, your calls, your meals, it stops feeling like you're living. It's just executing. Aubrey rested her chin in her hand. Then why don't you stop? Because I built it. And if I stop, everything I built might crack, she nodded slowly. So you keep waking up at 3? Yeah. Marco brought over 2 tiny espresso cups and a plate of almond cookies. Milo watched as Aubrey broke one in half and handed it to him. He took it without hesitation. Thanks, he said. She met his eyes again. You're weirdly honest for someone with a net worth, he smiled. You're weirdly fearless for someone who's lost everything. They didn't leave right away. They lingered, letting the clatter of dishes and hum of conversation fill the space around them. When they finally stepped outside, the wind had picked up, brushing her hair across her face. Milo reached out and tucked it behind her ear before he could stop himself. She froze, then looked up at him. You know this wasn't a date, right? I know, he said, but it felt like one. She didn't pull away. And what if I don't do dates with guys who wear jackets that probably cost more than my rent? Then I'll wear something cheaper next time, he said quietly. She laughed once, the breath visible in the cold air. You're not going to quit, are you? He shook his head. Not a chance. Aubrey turned, hands stuffed in her coat pockets as she walked toward the street, but before she reached the corner, she called over her shoulder. Don't show up in a suit next time, you'll scare Marco. He watched her go, the sound of her boots fading with the wind. For the first time in months, Milo didn't feel like walking the rooftop alone. Aubrey didn't expect the flowers. They were waiting on her desk when she arrived at the museum the next morning, tucked between the cracked leather-bound guest book and the sign and tablet. A tall, sculptural arrangement of wild peonies and eucalyptus, the kind of bouquet that looked like it had been arranged by someone with a degree in aesthetics. No card, no sender name, just a folded note at the base. Dinner was real, so are you. She stared at it for a full minute before touching anything. Her coworker, Danny, leaned over the front desk with a raised brow. Okay, who's trying to get into your good graces with a florist's mortgage payment? Aubrey didn't answer. Her mouth felt dry. Later that afternoon, she found herself staring at her reflection in the glass of the gallery's east wing. Her vest was buttoned crookedly, and her badge was slightly tilted. She fixed it, watching her own hands as if they belonged to someone else. She hadn't expected Milo Carter to follow up. Not because he wasn't sincere, he had been, but because people didn't usually make time for her twice. Not the kind of people who held boardroom power in their pinky fingers. The kind who lived in penthouses she only saw in glossy spreads at the salon. So when her phone buzzed in her pocket with an unfamiliar number and a message simply asking if she was free Friday night, she said yes before she could convince herself to say no. She didn't tell anyone. Not Jenna, not Danny, not even her neighbor who normally knew everything she did before she did it. She just picked a plain black dress from the back of her closet, tied her curls half up, and waited for the knock on her door. It wasn't a knock. It was a driver with a name placard, standing beside a sleek black car that gleamed like it had been polished by sunlight itself. Milo wasn't inside. He'll meet you at the restaurant, the driver said, opening the door for her like it was second nature. The car rolled through the city like it didn't belong to the same grid as everything else. They passed the museum, the street where Leo's hummed with warm light, and eventually pulled onto a quiet cobblestone road she didn't recognize. The building looked like it had been carved from marble, with gold-trimmed windows and a canopy overhead that bore no visible signage. The kind of place that didn't need to announce itself because everyone who mattered already knew it. She stepped out hesitantly and was immediately greeted by a man in a tailored suit who ushered her inside. Milo was waiting in the center of the dining room. He wasn't in a suit this time. He wore a dark sweater and slim trousers, his sleeves pushed up to the elbows like he'd been too focused on something to notice he'd done it. When he saw her, he stood straighter. I wasn't sure you'd come, he said. She walked toward him, her heels clicking against the polished floor. I wasn't sure either. He led her to a booth near the back, secluded but not hidden. The air smelled like citrus and clean linen, and the lights were soft, casting faint shadows across his face. "So," she said, sliding into the seat across from him. "What is this place?" He glanced around. "Technically, it's a private dining club. I use it sometimes for investor meetings, but tonight it's just ours." Her eyes widened. "You rented the whole place," he looked at her carefully. "I didn't want anyone interrupting." She exhaled a slow breath. "You don't do small, do you?" "I don't know how to do anything halfway." The words hung between them. She reached for her water glass. "You know, you're kind of impossible." He didn't flinch. "And you keep showing up anyway." She didn't deny it. Dinner wasn't ordered, it was presented. Course after course, delicate and strange, arriving without fanfare. Aubrey tried everything, even the things she couldn't pronounce, and Milo watched her with quiet amusement. "You don't fake anything," he said after she made a face at a bite of something gelatinous and green. "It's refreshing." "I don't see the point in pretending," she said. "I mean, what's the worst that happens? Someone thinks I'm not polished enough." He tilted his head. "People usually try to impress me." She stabbed a piece of fish with her fork. "You're not that scary." "No, you're weird and kind of intense, but not scary." He laughed, actually laughed, and the sound was lower than she expected. Not polished, not corporate, just him. Between the dessert and the coffee, his expression shifted, serious again. "I want to ask you something." She leaned forward, bracing. "Okay. Come with me to a gala next weekend." She coughed. "A gala? It's a fundraiser for a foundation I support. It's black tie, too many cameras, boring speeches, but I'll be there and I'd rather not go alone." She blinked. "Why me?" He studied her. "Because you don't care who's in the room, and I like who I am when I'm with you." She looked down at her linen napkin. "That's a dangerous thing to say." "Why?" "Because I'm not a part of your world. And it's easier to like someone when they don't threaten your balance." "You're not threatening, you're grounding." She didn't answer right away. Then finally, "What would I even wear?" He smiled. "I'll take care of that." She raised a brow. "You're not buying me a dress." "I'm not buying you anything," he said calmly. "I'm arranging for you to borrow something from someone who owes me a favor. No price tags." "No strings." "That still feels like a string." "Then consider it a ribbon." For reasons she couldn't explain, that made her laugh. She pressed a hand to her mouth, eyes shining. "Okay," she said. "But if I fall down in heels, you're catching me." He looked at her like he'd already decided he would catch her, no matter what. When he walked her to the car, he didn't kiss her. He didn't touch her hand or linger too long. He just opened the door, waited until she was inside, and said, "Good night, Aubrey." The door closed softly between them. As the car pulled away, she realized her heart was pounding, not from adrenaline, but from anticipation. Something about tonight had shifted the ground beneath her. And for the first time in years, she wasn't afraid of where it might lead. The night of the gala, the city wore a different skin, glossy, deliberate, like someone had polished every surface with expectation. The building itself loomed like a monument to wealth. Gilded pillars, a valet line of cars that cost more than most homes, and a gold-lit staircase sweeping into a marble foyer where no one raised their voice but everyone wanted to be heard. Aubrey stepped out of the car in a dress that fit like it had been made specifically for her, because, apparently, it had. The woman who'd measured her 2 days ago in a penthouse studio hadn't asked questions. She just pinned, nodded, and left the room with a call to Mr. Carter, confirming everything was in motion. Now, standing under crystal chandeliers taller than her old apartment ceiling, Aubrey felt like she'd walked into someone else's movie. Milo was waiting just inside the ballroom, his tuxedo tailored with surgical precision. She spotted him before he saw her, his posture straight, his head tilted slightly as he responded to a man in a navy tux and silver cufflinks. Even surrounded by power players, Milo looked like the one holding the strings. When he turned and finally saw her, his expression shifted, not performative or rehearsed, but quietly stunned. He excused himself from the conversation mid-sentence and made his way to her, steady and certain. "I didn't think you could surprise me anymore," he said, his voice low. She scanned the room behind him. "You sure you want to be seen with someone who doesn't know the difference between a canapé and a crostini?" "I want to be seen with the only person here who doesn't care." She didn't answer, but she let him press her hand into the crook of his elbow as he guided her through the crowd. The first hour was a blur of introductions. People smiled too wide, asked questions with motives behind their teeth, and made assumptions about who she was. Milo deflected most of them effortlessly. When one woman in a velvet gown asked where Aubrey had summered last year, Milo leaned in and responded, "Brooklyn, above a bakery." Aubrey nearly choked on her champagne. Between speeches and auctions, they found a quiet spot near a balcony lined with ivy. The noise dimmed behind them. "You know, half the people in that room think I'm your escort," Aubrey said, watching the city lights blink below. "Then they're underestimating both of us." Milo loosened his tie slightly. "You handled them better than I expected. I worked front desk at the museum the day the mayor came through." "Nothing scares me now," he smiled, but his gaze lingered on her. "You make everything feel less curated." She leaned against the railing. "You keep saying things like that, and I'm going to start thinking you actually like me." "I do," he said without hesitation. She blinked. "That's fast." "Not for me. Fast is how I live, but wanting something real, that's new." Silence settled between them, but it wasn't empty. "I need to tell you something," he said finally, "and I didn't want to say it until I was sure." She straightened. "Okay, I'm stepping down. From Carter Tech, or at least taking a very long leave." "What?" He met her eyes. "I've built something I can't even recognize anymore. It owns me more than I own it. And since I met you, I've started wondering what else I could build if I stopped trying to control every inch of my life." She stared at him. "You're changing your entire life because of me?" "No. I'm changing it because you reminded me I had the option to." She looked away for a moment, trying to process the weight of it. "That's a lot. I don't want you to feel responsible. I just want you to know the truth." She turned back to him. "What happens now, that depends," he said. "On whether you'll let me be part of your world for a while, instead of trying to pull you into mine." She blinked. "You want to come to my world?" He nodded. "I want to wake up and not check a stock ticker first. I want to take you to that museum and hear what you see in the art. I want to meet people who don't care what I'm worth, just whether I show up." She didn't speak for a long moment. "Then, you're serious?" "I've never been more." The ballroom doors opened behind them, letting out a swell of music, but neither of them moved. "I don't know what this is going to look like," she said, her voice quiet. "I can't promise I won't mess it up sometimes." "I don't need promises," he said. "I just need you to keep showing up." She looked at him and saw none of the man who had first sat beside her at a concert out of convenience. She saw someone who had spent too long in a life that looked perfect from the outside and now wanted something undeniably real. She stepped closer. "Okay then. Let's see what happens." He reached for her hand, lacing their fingers together not like a claim, but a question she was finally ready to answer. They didn't go back inside. Instead, they slipped out the side door, past the valet and the velvet ropes, and into the quiet street beyond. Aubrey didn't ask where they were going. She just let him walk beside her, the hem of her gown brushing the pavement, the city pulsing around them in gold and shadow. And for the first time in a long time, Milo Carter wasn't thinking about the next deal, the next meeting, or the next version of his life. He was thinking about her, about the girl who saved him a seat without knowing she was saving him at all. And that was the only thing that mattered. Rain fell in a fine mist as Aubrey stepped out of the subway station, the museum's arched silhouette rising ahead of her like a memory she hadn't quite shaken off. Her shift didn't start for another 20 minutes, but she'd learned to arrive early. Time gave her space to breathe, to watch the city before it noticed her. She hadn't seen Milo in 4 days. Not because something was wrong. He'd called, sent photos of a half-finished painting he was working on himself, and even left a voice message reading a passage from a book he found in a second-hand shop, but because he'd flown to Seattle for a final board meeting. The actual one. The meeting that would finalize his leave from the company he'd built with his own blood. She hadn't asked how it went, not because she wasn't curious, but because she knew he'd tell her when he was ready, and because she wanted to give him what no one else ever had: stillness without expectation. Inside the museum lobby, Danny waved her over with an odd expression. "You've got a package," she said, sliding a long, narrow box across the counter. No return address, but I think you're going to want to open it now. Aubrey peeled the tape slowly, heart tapping against her ribs like a warning. Inside was a rolled canvas. She unfurled it carefully, her breath caught. It was her. Not a portrait, not exactly. It was her silhouette seated in a Leo's, head tilted, smiling at something just out of frame. The strokes were loose and kinetic, the colors warm with deep navy shadows and hints of gold. It wasn't hyperrealistic. It was emotional. At the bottom corner in thin charcoal was a single word, home. She turned it over. A folded card was tucked into the back. I wanted to remember the moment everything changed. Meet me on the rooftop tonight. You'll know which one. She did. That evening, she stood in the elevator of the tallest building in Tribeca, her coat damp from the mist. A security guard had waved her through with a smile and a nod, no questions. When the doors opened, she stepped into a rooftop garden she hadn't known existed. Strings of warm lights zigzagged above her, casting soft halos over the space. Planters overflowed with rosemary, lavender, and lemon trees. A table for two stood near the edge, flanked by tall glass panels that shielded the wind. Milo stood beside it in a slate gray sweater, sleeves pushed to his forearms. His expression was unreadable, but his eyes didn't leave hers. "You painted that?" she asked as she stepped into the light. He nodded. "The first thing I've made in years that wasn't for a return." She moved closer, heart aching in a way that had nothing to do with sadness. "What happened in Seattle?" I walked out of the boardroom, he said. "Told them I was taking a year, maybe more. I'm keeping my shares, but I'm done letting the company define me." She reached for his hand. "Are you okay with that?" "I'm terrified," he said, "but I feel more like myself than I have since I was 23. The wind rustled the lemon trees. Somewhere below, a siren wailed faintly and faded. "There's more," he said. "I've been thinking about how we met, that seat, that moment. It was a fluke, but it changed everything. I don't want to keep chasing moments like that. I want to build them." "Milo, I found a space," he said, voice low, "a few blocks from the museum. It's messy and full of light. I want to turn it into something. A studio, a gallery, a place for art that doesn't come with velvet ropes, and I want you to be part of it. Not just as inspiration, as my partner. However you want to define that." She stared at him, heart cracking open in a way she hadn't known was possible. Her voice was quiet but steady. "You really want to do this? With you?" He stepped closer. "I've never wanted anything more." She looked up at him, the wind pressing curls against her cheek. "Then say it." "I love you, Aubrey." It wasn't grand, it wasn't shouted. It was a truth spoken simply, without armor. She stepped into him, wrapped her arms around his waist, and pressed her face into his chest. "I love you too," she whispered. He held her like he finally understood what it meant to be still. They didn't eat the dinner waiting on the table. They stood there, watching the city lights flicker below, their foreheads pressed together, the world shrinking down to just them. Weeks passed. The gallery opened quietly, no press releases, no champagne flutes, just soft music, open doors, and a sign that read, "Come as you are." Aubrey curated the first show, mixed media from underrepresented local artists. Milo painted in the back studio, sometimes with the door open, sometimes with it closed. On slower afternoons, she'd slip inside and sit cross-legged beside him, watching as he lost himself in shape and color. They moved into a brownstone with creaky stairs and a clawfoot tub, halfway between the gallery and the best dumpling place in the city. Jenna cried when she saw it. Danny visited weekly with her boyfriend and brought wine that cost too much. Marco sent them boxes of pasta with handwritten recipes. One evening, as the sun dipped below the skyline, Milo came down the stairs barefoot, holding something small in his hands. "What's that?" Aubrey asked, curled up on the couch with a book. He held up a key attached to a thin gold chain. "I was thinking," he said, sitting beside her, "the gallery has your name on the lease. The brownstone has mine. Maybe it's time we fixed that." She looked at him, wide-eyed. He didn't kneel, he didn't make a speech. He just handed her the key and said, "Let's make everything ours." She slid the chain over her head, eyes shining. "Already is," she whispered. They kissed as the room filled with golden light, the noise of the city softened by the windows and the quiet hum of something permanent. And together they stayed.